Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, our mission is a really focused analysis. We're looking at just one source you shared with us. It's the lyric transcript for a song called Blessed Are You by William Toll.
Right. And normally we might have, stacks of reports or papers, but these lyrics, they function almost like a concentrated philosophical text.
Exactly. So our deep dive today is really about nailing down three things from this source. What's the source of spiritual revitalization it talks about? What are the specific criteria for being called blessed?
And importantly, how does conflict play a role? Does it confirm the path someone is on?
Yeah, we're going to treat this text almost like a map. We need to unpack these really potent images. Things like the lost dead men who get revived, and then you have the righteous folks with their fancy titles and clothes who seem to be the antagonist.
And the collision between those two groups really forces a definition of, well, what true spiritual worth means according to this text.
Okay, let's unpack this.
So we should probably start where the text starts, right? With the central figure,
Yeah.
the preacher.
Right, the lyrics paint this picture. A man, crowds around him, and he's preaching to the lost. But it's that next description that really lands with weight. The audience isn't just, misguided. They're lost dead men.
Yeah, dead men.
Yeah.
It's not a casual phrase, is it? It suggests a state of complete existential emptiness.
It really does. It elevates the teaching beyond just, good advice. It implies a condition that's maybe beyond ordinary hope. Only this specific message can bring revival.
It sets an incredibly high bar for what this message can do, its power, its urgency.
And the text makes that power quite literal. It says, these dead men were drinking from that fountain, and they came alive by what he taught.
So the teaching isn't just words you hear. It's presented as a fountain, an actual source of life. It enables a kind of resurrection.
Which establishes the teaching itself as this primary, vital, almost transformative force.
So what this opening scene really sets up is who the message is for. It's the marginalized, right? The ones written off. If it's powerful enough to revive lost dead men, maybe it implies that, the comfortable or the established, they don't need it.
Or perhaps they can't even receive it.
Possibly. The immediate impact described as radical change aims squarely at those who seem to have nothing left.
Okay, so we understand the teaching is presented as incredibly potent, life-giving. Now we get to the real core of the philosophy here. Who actually qualifies for the blessing?
Right. And this is where the lyrics get very specific and, honestly, quite counterintuitive compared to worldly values.
Oh, so?
Well, the blessing seems tied entirely to your inner state and your commitment. It immediately pushes aside external status. The very first criterion mentioned is that you have to walk on the road of only few.
That phrase really jumps out. Only few. It emphasizes scarcity, difficulty.
Exactly. It suggests the path to true spiritual worth, as defined here, is inherently unpopular. It's not the main highway. Even if crowds are listening, the path individuals take is maybe isolating or goes against the cultural grain.
And it connects to their internal state, too, doesn't it?
It does. They're blessed because they hunger for truth and thirst for truth. So the blessing isn't for those who sort of arrived at knowledge, but for those who maintain this active, almost unsatisfied desire for it.
Like a perpetual seeking.
Precisely. Not a complacent, I've got it all figured out kind of state. That hunger is key.
Okay, but let's pause on this because here's where the philosophy gets, well, maybe a bit tough. You've got humility and scarcity, the road of only few. And then the next blessed characteristics are the meek and the poor in spirit, and also the earth and the dirt.
That's a really powerful combination, isn't it? It directly links low social standing, maybe material poverty, with spiritual favor. Being of the earth and the dirt, it sort of roots spiritual identity in the most basic, unadorned human condition.
But hang on, let's introduce a bit of critical tension here. If the blessing is so explicitly tied to low status, poor in spirit, dirt, meekness, what's the implication for someone who does have wealth or status?
Well, that's kind of the rhetorical punch of this text, I think. It completely flips worldly priorities. By saying the poor and the meek are blessed, it strongly implies, doesn't it, that the wealthy, the proud, the ones relying on status, they're spiritually at a disadvantage.
Or maybe even blocked entirely.
That seems to be the thrust. It forces a choice, almost. Worldly acceptance versus this specific spiritual gain. The criteria feel intentionally exclusive.
It sounds like it demands a kind of conscious shedding of external status, or at least not relying on it.
And the anchor for all these humble states seems to be the destination. Being in the heart, bound for the garden.
Right, that's the only external destination mentioned, but the path there is defined entirely by internal commitment and condition.
Yeah, that phrase bound for the garden,
Hmm.
it reinforces the idea that the journey is about direction and purpose.
Hmm.
It doesn't matter how hard the current path of dirt and scarcity is, the blessing is tied to that certainty of purpose, not, comfort along the way.
So it's a message that really elevates internal devotion, vulnerability above everything else. But as we often see, any philosophy that radically inverts status like this, well, it tends to attract hostility.
Definitely. And that brings us neatly into the next section, section 3, which introduces the antagonists very clearly. And what's fascinating is how they're defined. It's almost entirely by their external appearance and position.
Yeah, the lyrics talk about the righteous folks surrounded who had titles in their clothes.
Titles in their clothes. Not just righteous folks, but ones whose righteousness is somehow tied to their status, their labels.
It suggests institutional legitimacy, maybe a superficial kind of righteousness based on those titles. And those titles represent their investment in the very system the preacher's message seems to be undermining.
Exactly. They represent vested interests. This message saying the poor and meek are blessed, that's a direct threat to a power structure built on titles and outward appearances.
And their response is described as pretty brutal, isn't it? They plan to silence him and pound him for all the truth he spoke.
Right. The truth itself, the thing that revives the lost, is perceived by them as a physical threat, an existential threat to their structure.
The clash is stark. You have the persecutors, defined by the outer shell clothes, titles, external metrics, and the followers, defined by the inner core, hunger, spirit, humility.
And then comes this really profound twist in the lyrics. The hostility isn't presented as a failure or a setback.
No, it's framed as confirmation. The preacher actually tells his followers, "Blessed are you when others revile and persecute, mocking the truth when following God is all you do."
Yes, the persecution itself becomes a positive sign, a validator. Being mocked, being reviled, it's presented as proof you're on the right track. Proof that you are, as the lyrics say, marking the truth, we're following God as you do.
So, if the system that values titles and clothes attacks you,
It means you must be succeeding, according to the criteria of the road of only few. It validates your choice.
that's a really uncompromising worldview. It demands that followers embrace rejection, not just tolerate it, but see it as a sign of progress.
It implies that peace and acceptance from the established order might actually be warning signs, not rewards.
So, logically, success as defined by the world of titles would seem to automatically disqualify you from this particular spiritual blessing.
According to this source, yes. The path of true knowledge it describes runs directly counter to worldly comfort and acceptance. It expects friction.
Okay, let's try and synthesize this whole arc for the listener then. If we treat this lyric as a kind of manifesto, what are the absolute core tenets it demands?
Well, the central conclusion seems unavoidable. True spiritual wealth, in this framework, is intrinsically linked to vulnerability, to self-denial even. The text really insists you have to embrace being an outsider, poor in spirit, of the earth and the dirt. That's almost the price of entry for receiving this truth.
And it totally reframes the cost of knowledge, doesn't it? The price isn't just effort or study, it's attracting actual hostility from those whose status is built on, well, other definitions of righteousness.
It really sets up a stark binary choice, I think. Either you chase acceptance and status, which aligns you with the persecuting titles and clothes, or you commit to this unpopular, difficult path, the one that promises revitalization and blessing, but pretty much guarantees rejection from the mainstream.
So the ultimate blessing described here is actually the ability to endure that hostility while staying fiercely committed to that internal pursuit of truth.
Exactly. The outer conflict just reinforces the inner conviction, your journey towards the garden. It's an incredibly demanding philosophy, but it's structurally very coherent within its own logic.
It certainly is.
Which, raises a really important question for you, the listener, to maybe mull over. These lyrics clearly define the true pursuit of God, partly by the negative reaction it gets, the mocking, the persecution.
Right, being persecuted validates the path.
So if that's the case, how do we, in our world today, distinguish between, say, a genuine pursuit of truth that naturally attracts hostility?
Versus someone maybe just adopting contrary or rejection-seeking behavior for its own sake. How do you tell the difference if persecution itself is seen as the badge of honor?
That is a challenging question, especially, in an age where conflict can seem so easily manufactured or sought out.
Well, thank you for sharing this really fascinating, intensely layered lyric transcript of us. It certainly gave us a lot of profound structures to dig into.
Absolutely. Food for thought.
Indeed. We'll catch you next time for another deep dive.